Happy to greet Rebecca Rose Makkai, Makkai Rebecca Rózsa, renowned writer from Chicago, granddaughter of the writer and actress Ignácz Rózsa, with the occasion of her visit to the birthplace of her grandma. It's the memorial days of Ignácz Rózsa. How comes that you are here?
I've always wanted to come here, and I've never really had exactly the opportunity. But this was really just luck that this summer I happened to click like on the Facebook page for the memorial organization, and then Márta, who organizes this, saw that and messaged me right away and said, "I think you are Ignácz Rózsa's granddaughter. Would you like to come this fall? This is the year we're doing this." And it worked out perfectly. I needed to be in Europe sometime this fall anyway, and so I kind of made 2 trips in one, but I would have been happy to come just for this alone.
So let's talk about the family relationships. You are the daughter of Ignácz Rózsa's son, Makkai Ádám, and he actually left Hungary after 1956. So you were born and raised in Chicago, right? And I read in one of your writings that you have 2 native languages, but you only speak one.
Yeah.
So how is this?
I grew up speaking only English, but there was Hungarian around me all the time. My father's relatives, a lot of them were from this area, so they were escaping throughout the 1980s, fleeing from Ceausescu and all the problems in the 80s. And coming very often to Chicago because my father was already there, and some coming from Hungary as well. Sometimes they lived with us, they moved to live nearby, and my father also found all the Hungarians around Chicago and would put on a party or a concert. So it was spoken all around. My mother learned Hungarian. Both of my parents were linguists, so this was apparently not that hard for her to learn Hungarian. It's very hard for everybody else in the world. So I know the sounds of the language very, very well, but I did not grow up speaking it, except for a few songs and rhymes and things like that. So I've had to work very hard to start to learn it as an adult. But I have a very different relationship to it because I can hear very clearly. I can hear my own accent, which drives me nuts, and I can hear what sounds wrong and right in the same way you really only can in a native language. I can't tell that difference in French, which I studied for years. I can tell it, though, in Hungarian, what sounds right, where is my accent off, which is a blessing and a curse.
Okay. What were you looking forward when you decided to come and take part at this festive occasion?
Yeah, I didn't really, I had to come in not knowing what to expect, because I think that's the only way you can travel happily, is to go in with a sense of adventure and not knowing anything. But I knew that there's this memorial room at the parsonage of the church where her father was the priest. So I knew that I would get to see that, and I was very happy to see some photos that I've never seen before of her, and to see where she grew up, and to get to know this town a little bit. That's all I was really hoping for, was just to absorb a place. But everyone's been incredibly welcoming, and it's been wonderful to get to know a few people, so I feel that if I come back, which I really hope to do, so when I come back, that I'll have people to be in touch with, people who I can, I can have lunch with or have a coffee with that I know. And I very much, it would be very important for me to bring my sister back here. She would really love to see this place as well. We are the only 2 grandchildren of Ignácz Rózsa. So for that reason, among many others, I'd like to return. So this has been an added blessing that I feel like I've made some wonderful connections here with people.
This is very nice to hear, and we would like to welcome you next time and next time and next time. And it would be a great honor if you took part in the competition that is organized for young people every autumn with days of Ignácz Rózsa. We are thinking in a competition which involves translation of Ignácz Rózsa works. I know that you couldn't read any of your grandma's books because they are not translated to English. What's the case with this?
Yeah, that's basically it. I am at the point where I can have a very basic conversation in Hungarian, but that's quite different from reading pretty dense, regional, often historical literature, which is about as hard as it gets. So I can, I will try, I'll look at things she wrote and see, okay, now I can make out most of the first sentence of this book, but there's 2 phrases I don't understand, and I look them up, and even Google Translate can't help me because they're idiomatic expressions that the computer doesn't know. So eventually, I need, first, there are 2 things. I need to get much better at Hungarian, which I'm doing, but I'll still need to work with someone to translate to read. But she wrote between 30 and 40 books. It's hard to get an accurate count because she wrote so many different things. And she died when I was a baby, so I never got to have a conversation with her about anything, let alone about being a writer and having so much in common with her. But I have these books waiting for me that I can read, and I can get to know her. It's just such a difficult situation that I can't read them. They were translated into German and Italian, I know for sure, and I think maybe a couple of other languages, but not into English. A few essays of hers have been, very short pieces, and that's it.
And is there any chance that they get translated to English?
Oh yes, when I read them, it won't just be for myself. I very much hope that at least a couple of them I can get published in English translation. And my connections in the American literary world are strong enough that I can certainly make that happen. She was an important enough writer, and I know, the right people at the right presses who would be interested in this. The presses in America that do translation are particularly interested in regions that we don't have translated literature from. And we have some contemporary Transylvanian literature in translation, but we really don't have much that I'm aware of from that time. And, I think that as opposed to another book from Budapest, which it's not as if there's too much in English from Hungarian translation, but I think they'd be even more excited that this is Transylvanian. So it's just, and the connection to me, if I could write the introduction, would help a great deal. So it's a matter of me mastering the most difficult language in the world first, finding someone to help, and then making this happen. I'm joking, but I think I need a couple more years for me of really intense study before I can be an active participant in translation, even just only on the English side of things. You need a native speaker to translate out of that language, and maybe I can help on the English end.
Mm-hmm. Who do you think would be interested in Rózsa's novel stories?
I think, first of all, anyone interested in this region. And a lot of the Hungarians in America are erdély magyar, and I think they would certainly be interested. I think there are just also people who are serious intellectual readers who want to read the important literature from every place in the world, who are not content just reading in English. And in English literature, we're very spoiled because there's so much published in English to begin with, not only from America, but Canada and England and South Africa, Nigeria, Australia. You would never run out of books. Whereas for my own books, I've been very interested when I've traveled for my translations of my work. I'll go someplace like Barcelona, and there's a Catalan translation, and there are amazing writers writing in Catalan, but you go into the bookstore and it's almost all literature and translation. At least more than half of the bookstore is translated, and then Catalan. And we get very spoiled reading in English. We don't need to read from other cultures, so some people don't. They only read American or American, Canadian, British. But there are plenty of people who are very serious readers who really care about reading from everywhere and really care about translation as an art, really care about not only the translation of language, but the translation of culture and ethos and idea and history.
I understand. So in one of your podcasts I listened to, you spoke about Hungarian favorites. Like you have a Hungarian favorite food.
Oh, sure.
Hungarian favorite novel.
Sure.
Do you think you will have a Hungarian favorite topic?
In terms, meaning?
In terms of writing about,
That's a good question.
including in one of your books.
My
What are you working on right now?
Yeah, I don't think that I would ever know either Budapest or Kovászna, Székelyföld, well enough to write about it as if I were someone who really knew it, right? But I'm very interested in writing about my family. And although I'm a novelist, I do sometimes write personal pieces. And I think that my father's family history is very interesting and very complicated. Ignácz Rózsa is a part of that, a big part of that, but my grandfather, to whom she was only married for a little while, is a very complicated, very long story. Their extended family is a very complicated story, and I think that I very much hope that I can write someday what I'd call a memoir, but I don't mean that in the sense of it being about me, but a nonfiction exploration of my family and their history, but also about my learning Hungarian and what my relationship to a grandmother I never knew, my relationship to a very difficult grandfather whom I barely knew, and slowly learning more and more about them. And that's a book that I could write. So I hope to.
And what are you working on right now?
Yeah, I was in Berlin for research right before this. This is a very difficult topic, but I'm writing a novel about the very problematic German filmmaker Leni Riefenstahl, who made documentaries for Hitler. And this is a very dark, heavy story. She is not someone I admire, but she visited the United States in 1938 and 1939, and that's the part that I'm writing about, the most approachable part for an American and the most relevant part for an American. So I was in Berlin right before this, using their wonderful state library to do archival research and to read her papers and her letters. And it's my interest in her story is very much wrapped up personally in my interest in what happened with my grandfather in Budapest at that same time. And he also visited the US in 1940 and wrote about it. And that's something that I've then been reading kind of in a computer translation as a help for this book. So it is a very personal project, even though I'm not German and I don't admire in any way the woman that I'm writing about. It's still a very personal project.
You don't pick very light topics.
I don't. Yeah, I'll say this, every time that I try to write something very light, it ends up very serious. And every time I try to write something very serious, it ends up with a lot of humor in it. So I can't go in either direction. It's always going to be a mixture of both.
Two of your books have been translated to Hungarian.
Yeah.
Which of them would you recommend to young people?
Gosh.
We work with young people too in the association, but generally speaking, to Hungarian
Right.
readers?
Oh gosh, I think it depends on what kind of young person I'm talking to. But I think for most of them, my most recent book, which in English is called I Have Some Questions for You, it's about someone looking back on her time in high school, and on the tragic death of a classmate and trying to make sense of it. So there's a way in which young people maybe could relate most strongly to that. The book before that, that's also been translated into Hungarian, the English title is The Great Believers, and the Hungarian title is Lényegében, which it's a book about the AIDS epidemic. So I think it's the 4 letters of AIDS was the reference. But it's about young men in Chicago in the 1980s dealing with AIDS. So for some readers, if their interests were in that direction, I would direct them over there. But I think for most young readers, probably the newer one would be more interesting.
Okay. Thank you. Rebecca, this was the first time you visited Transylvania,
Yes.
the first time you came to Kovászna, the first time you entered the house where your grandma grew up. What are the feelings that you take with you?
Oh gosh. That's a good question. First of all, I don't think I understood how beautiful this area was. I really was just overwhelmed driving in. I had a driver, coming in from Bucharest, which is a very long drive, and was just absolutely overwhelmed with how beautiful it was and how much it looks exactly right to me. To me, this is what the world should look like. This number of hills and this much sky and these kinds of houses, and it's just perfect. And I don't know if that's something, in my blood. The air smells exactly right, so I don't know. But it's tricky because you know that you're going to an important place, so you feel something maybe because you know you're supposed to, and so it's hard to separate. Would I feel this anyway? If I didn't know where I was, would I come here and feel something? And I don't know, but it's been it is really just incredibly beautiful. I don't think I really was picturing correctly the place where she grew up, the house where she grew up, and even seeing photos of her that I haven't seen before, when she was very young, changed my perception of her a bit. But the entire place, I'll say, I grew up surrounded by so much Transylvanian culture in terms of the pillows on our couch, the dishes, the music, just everything, that things feel very familiar to me. So, I was looking for something to, souvenir shop to take home, something for my kids yesterday. And Kinga, who's translating for me, was pointing out, she said, "Oh, this pottery is very local." And I said, "Yes, I know. I grew up with this all over my house. This is very, very familiar." So it feels, on the one hand, of course, very new. It's new to me, but it also feels very, very familiar.
One last question. Whose memory did you meet with? Your grandma's or the writers?
Yeah, this was something I was speaking about today. We had the ceremony today. It's not a normal relationship that someone would have with their grandmother, where they remember getting hugs from a sweet old lady. It's because I don't remember meeting her. I was a baby the only time we met, and I really can't help but see her more as a kindred spirit, as someone who's very, very much like me, more than maybe anyone in the world, who, of course, was my grandmother. She held me as a baby. She saw me as a baby, and perceived me that way. But I don't know that there's a word for it, right? It's not, grandmother isn't the right word, but I see all the things I inherited from her, and I see in the photos, I can pick out, well, this looks like my daughter, this looks like my sister. I was very surprised to see a photo yesterday of her and her brother and her sister. And her brother looks exactly like one of my nephews. And I sent the photo to my sister and I said, look. So there's it's not simply like meeting, like going to the birthplace of a writer I admire. It's not like that. It's something much deeper and more personal. But grandmother isn't the right word, and I don't know what is. Maybe there's a Hungarian word. Maybe there's a very long Hungarian word that explains.
And you will find the right sentence to put it into.
Yeah.
Rebecca, thank you very much.
Köszönöm szépen.